Hi, Rachel.
Hey, Bryce. Everyone made it. We've got,
Just us two so far, or are there others on there?
no, if you click on participants, we have about 17 people logged on.
Okay. All right.
And we have you and Walt and Kyla and Chelsea. And we're just waiting on one or two others from the panel. So we'll probably get started a couple of minutes after 12.
Okay, sounds good. I'm gonna step away for a second and take care of something, and then I'll be right back.
Sounds good. Hey, Brian. Good to see you.
Same here, Rachel. Thank you.
Looks like we've got about 27 folks logged on, so we'll just wait a couple minutes after noon to get going.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Well, Robbie and Brian, what do you think? I feel like we should get going.
Yeah, let's get rocking.
All right, we have 45 people on the call. This is exciting. Welcome everyone to the first in the Alaska Food Policy Council's 2021 Food Systems Discussion Series. We are really excited to welcome you, our attendees, our speakers, and our panelists today. First, we'd like to let everyone know that this is being recorded for future use. We will, the Food Policy Council will post this for future reference. So if you do not want to be recorded, you do not want to have your presence known, I guess, don't turn on your camera and don't turn on your mic. There we go. So welcome, my name is Rachel Miller. I co-chair the Alaska Food Policy Council, and we're going to kick off today our discussion series webinar on food systems transportation around the state of Alaska. We're going to kick it off with a little bit of a welcome, a little bit about Alaska Food Policy Council, and then we will jump right into it. And first and foremost, I'd like to take a second to acknowledge the lands that we are on. The Alaska Food Policy Council recognizes that across the state, we live, work, play, and eat on and from Indigenous lands. This is an evolving conversation in the state and across the world, and we think it's important that everyone takes the responsibility to educate themselves about the lands that they are on. And if you are so inclined, you can text the number on the screen, and if you text your city and state or your zip code, you get a text back that lets you know the Indigenous lands that you are on. And here is exactly what that looks like. So, pretty neat resource for all of us living and playing and eating up here. So what is the Alaska Food Policy Council? As I look through the participant list, we know many of you have been to the Alaska Food Festival and Conference, which is our flagship event that happens every 18 months. And our most recent one was in November of 2020. And we heard a very loud, clear call to action that folks in the state want a couple things. They want, first and foremost, a more robust food system. And to do that, we need more collaboration, more engagement, more teamwork across the state, working on doing just that. And so answering that call at the conference, we decided to put together a modest discussion series this year. We think it's going to be at least 4 webinars. This one obviously focusing on food transportation. And at the end of this session, we will ask you all what else you want to hear about. Who else should we pull into the discussion for future webinars? And so we will poll you at the end to ask about your thoughts. So thank you for being here again. And as you likely well know, our goal is to create a healthier, more secure, and more self-reliant Alaska by improving our food system. If you would like to learn more about the Food Policy Council and what we do, largely we connect, we inform, we advocate. We are nonpartisan, we do not lobby, we simply aggregate information to share out so folks can educate themselves. We are always accepting membership on our committees. We have several working groups and committees going right now, including food waste, Indigenous food systems, policy and advocacy. And if you are interested to learn more, check us out at akfoodpolicycouncil.org. And that's the link as well that you can donate to support future events like this, because we believe in compensating people for their time. This is what we're doing today. It is already 12:08, and so I will not take too much more of your time. But we just wanted to welcome everyone again, explain a little bit about what the Food Policy Council does. We will wrap up the session with some more of that information. Robbie is our executive director. We hired an executive director this year, rather last year, for the first time ever, and she'll be doing some tech management today, chatting some links and probably muting a few microphones, helping folks out. Thanks, Robbie. We're going to start the day out with an expert presentation by Chelsea Ward-Waller, who is on the next slide. We'll get to her in a second. After we have our short expert presentation to set some common language and get us all on the same page to discuss food systems transportation, we will have about 50 minutes, 40 to 50 minutes for an expert panel with some Q&A during the session. And you can use your chat feature on Zoom to engage with Q&A. We're asking that everyone turn off your notifications on your phones, keep your mics on mute until it's time and we ask for questions, please. And at the end of this, here's where we're trying to make a difference. We're doing this panel presentation, we're doing this expert presentation. We also want to have communities feel empowered to voice their own opinion and individuals to talk about what really what they see as challenges in food transportation in Alaska. And so at the end of this session, we can take what we know, take some of the thoughts you brought to this webinar today, and we will be chatting out a questionnaire link. If we have time, with the 47 people on this call, we'd like to do some breakout groups for some facilitated discussion. And moving forward, we will aggregate all of your feedback from these forms we'll issue you. And we'll report back out to the community because we think it's important for folks to know what's going on. So stay tuned as we go out, as we go through the session, and we will be chatting instructions. And if you're at any point confused, just chat in the box, chat one of us, we'll figure it out. So without further ado, we're going to begin our expert presentation with Chelsea Ward-Waller, who is from the municipality of Anchorage. She is a public information officer for Anchorage. She is dedicated to making Anchorage a better community for all residents. Professionally and personally, Chelsea is an advocate for active transportation, public transit, traffic safety, and she was a catalyst in bringing the Vision Zero initiative to Anchorage in 2016. And most recently, last year, Chelsea and I worked together on creating the Anchorage Climate Action Plan. I was trying to find the right word to describe Chelsea, and I wanted to say convener, but that doesn't feel powerful enough. Chelsea really is one of those shining personalities in our community who makes everyone feel welcome at the table and is very good about communicating information. So we were very grateful to Chelsea for offering up her time and energy and expertise today. Most recently, she has earned her master's in public health practice at University of Alaska Anchorage with a focus on transportation. So with that, Chelsea, I will stop sharing my screen. You are welcome to share yours.
Thank you so much, Rachel. While I get my screen up here. All right, are you seeing my presentation? Great. Now I just need to figure out how I see my notes. Okay, great. I thank you so much. That was so flattering, Rachel. I was going to mention your title for being an expert in transportation is a title I hope to grow into. I aspire to be an expert in transportation. And I love that it's part of the food system and it's important in so many different parts of our lives. And also just a quick caveat, I have half of a final report due for my master, so I'm almost have an MPH, but not quite there yet. It's been on the back burner for a little while here for maybe obvious reasons. But thank you so much for having me join today. I'm honored to be part of the Food Policy Council first discussion series event on food transportation. And so just a little bit more background about me. Rachel did a great job. I'm an advocate for active transportation and traffic safety, absolutely. I started back with the Food Policy Council. It was pretty much the first job I ever had in Alaska, actually. I worked for the consulting firm Denali Daniels and Associates, and we helped with a series of town halls that happened across Alaska in 2014, and also supported the first AFPC conference that happened that same year. So I'm also an aspiring backyard farmer, got my 8 chickens this summer. So love my local food, and love the connection to transportation. And just to follow up a little bit more about me, I've been really focused on COVID-19 for the last 10 months, specifically around communications, and love that it still continues to connect to food access. I think that the pandemic has been very challenging in lots and lots of different ways, and it's also been inspirational in the opportunities that it's presented to us to figure out better ways to get food access to people that need it, such as, using our local public transportation department to share Thanksgiving blessing packets, and also the school district working with their bus system when kids weren't in schools to get kids access to those school meals. So obviously plenty of challenges and opportunities that we'll continue to talk about, but lots of bright spots in the midst of this really, really challenging time. And so Rachel asked me to sort of put some sort of key terms together and a focus around transportation and food. And one of those areas was the marine highway system. And the highway system, the Alaska Marine Highway System currently extends 3,500 miles along the coastline and provides service to over 30 communities. It's been in existence for 50 years in 2013, so a little over 50 years now. And we know, I'm sure many of you on this call know that, the smaller communities especially that are not connected by road are really reliant on the Alaska Marine Highway System. And why do we care about it? People that eat food, why is it important to us? Well, for one, the reason I have my salmon from last summer on there is because it helps bring seafood shipment to market. It helps provide a lower cost, more capacity for seafood shipment, and provide refrigeration that's not available sometimes in other forms of transportation. In particular, the AMHS highlights the the connections between Kodiak and Homer, and also to Juneau in that really critical seafood shipment area. And then of course it also helps share groceries and other goods between communities, fresh produce, meat and dairy, and livestock as well. They mention, I think almost 20,000 pets and livestock that are on the Marine Highway System every year. And while I'm guessing many of those are people's pets that are going between communities, it's interesting to think how many of those would actually be livestock, and interesting connections there. So that's the background that I'm providing around the Marine Highway System, and I'm totally open to the group's feedback on other ways, that other background that we should be including, but I'm going to keep moving along and you all can help fill in here shortly. And so another sort of key term or important understanding around transportation and food and the connection to food is the Alaska Bypass Mail. And so that is a subsidized cargo shipment process that goes to rural Alaska, and that's been around since 1972. Consumer goods and groceries go to small communities at parcel post rates, and they go by palletized shipments, and they bypass the postal system, so that's why it's the bypass mail, and they go directly to the air carriers. It's in recent years, it's been a $100 million program by the federal government, and the rural consumer, typically a store, restaurant, or school district, is the one that pays about a third of that, and then the Postal Service makes up the difference. And in 2013, an Alaska DOT study commissioned by the bypass mail system found that potable liquids like milk or soft drinks and water are 40% of the volume of bypass mail. So I found that to be just sort of an interesting tidbit along in there. And I know it's been contentious in the federal government between folks that maybe don't understand the bypass mail system. If you live in the lower 48 on a road system, it may seem like a nonsensical amount of money to be spending, but we know that it's critical up here in Alaska. So with some of those sort of framing understandings, thinking about the challenges in food transportation in Alaska, from, as I mentioned, with the marine highway system, providing some refrigeration options that maybe other transportation means don't provide. That lack of cold storage is critical. There's a lack of financial incentive when we're thinking about shipping to more remote places that maybe don't have sort of economies of scale opportunities. As always in Alaska, everybody is familiar with the weather being a challenge. Everybody in South Central, I got an alert today that be careful if you're driving between Portage and Turnagain Pass, because there's going to be a big snowstorm, another big snowstorm coming into that area tomorrow. And then, of course, you know, thinking about the different challenges for fresh perishable foods and shelf-stable foods, and thinking about how we can work with those different areas to address the challenges that they each have.
Hey, Chelsea, can you
Yeah.
get, maybe just, I'm getting a couple of comments, if you could get a little bit closer to your mic.
Absolutely. Is this better?
That's great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Great. So I was, and I'm sorry, I don't have an easy way to look at the chat, but I wanted to stop and make my presentation less about me talking at you. And if folks have another one or two examples of challenges in food transportation that maybe aren't included on this slide, if you want to just put those in the chat, and maybe those can be referenced back during the work session at the end of this discussion. Thank you for bearing with me and my technical challenges. So with any challenge comes an opportunity. You learn that very quickly in the public health field, that, you know, there are ample challenges out there in the world, but those challenges all provide opportunities to make the world a better place. So, you know, we can look at opportunities such as further research around transportation and food. Alaska being relatively unique in the challenges that we have, I think it definitely warrants further research in a lot of different areas. And that research can help lead to policy change. It can help educate our policymakers and other folks about the challenges that we're having. And that policy change often leads to infrastructure investment. So, you know, again, just lots of opportunities amidst the many challenges. And once again, I would just ask the group, if you have sort of an opportunity that's on the tip of your tongue, if you don't mind just adding that into the chat or jotting it down so you can come back to it at the latter part of the discussion this morning or this afternoon, and help the group sort of discuss that and find ways to be actionable, as Rachel mentioned, in moving forward. So with that, I will take any questions that the group has for me, but I probably should just get out of the way and let the discussion series with the expert panel move forward. But I'll pause here real quick, Rachel, if there are any questions that you want me to take. Otherwise, I'll get out of the way.
We have some of the examples and stories that y'all have to share. Let's hold until the end. But some of the comments that I'm seeing, we're concerned about, obviously, the Alaska Marine Highway System. People are worried about the aging Port of Alaska based in Anchorage. Food on tarmacs in smaller communities is often limited and unregulated regarding storage. And then Kim Stryker saying the Alaska Food Safety Advisory Council did put together many years ago a transportation working group to look at these issues. And she's shared in the chat a couple things that came to mind, which is, as very commonly referenced, lack of cold chain resources in these hub communities, lack of training for folks working on the tarmacs or within the bypass mail system, lack of accountability for damaged or temperature abused foods. And Charles Bingham from Sitka says reduced ferry schedule means some communities don't have a ferry for groceries for months unless they fly it in, which we know there's a significant cost differential between barging and flying, especially when we get to some of these heavier, you know, liquid-based food goods. Great, thank you, Chelsea. I'll leave it to the group. Are there any final questions for Chelsea? And keep commenting in the chat.
Thanks again for having me and letting me sneak back into the food policy world.
We're always happy to have you, Chelsea. Thanks for being here. Well, as a time check, it is 12:23, and without further ado, we are going to kick off our expert panel. We are always so grateful for the folks in our community, the producers, the transporters, the processors, the regulators, and everywhere in between. When we ask people to share their knowledge, we realize it takes time, energy, and a chunk of their day when they could be doing something else. So we are grateful for your presence today and your expertise. And on the panel today, we have Kyla Byers, who is the founder operator of, excuse me, not the founder, she's the owner operator of Arctic Harvest Deliveries. We have Bryce Wrigley of the Alaska Flour Company, Walt Pickett of the AC Stores, the Alaska Commercial Company, Sandra Harbinuk of Alaska WIC. And if you don't know, WIC stands for Women, Infant, and Children. And very grateful to Brian Himmelblum, who's a member of the Alaska Food Policy Council Governing Board. He's down in Kodiak ready to moderate this panel, and very thankful for his service today. So Brian, I will let you kick it off.
Thanks, Rachel. And make sure I'm coming through clear. Yes. Okay. And thank you all for attending and your online participation. I know we're in the Zoom world and it's challenging, but I think this is one of the more engaging webinars that we're starting off 2021. So I don't have much to say other than I will be the moderator and try to keep an eye on time because we want to make sure that our expert panelists have a chance to answer a couple of questions that were developed between Rachel and our executive director, Robbie Mixon. So I guess we'll go in order as Rachel has put up the slide here. We'll start off with Kyla. And let's see how you want to do this. Do you want me to ask you the questions, or would you like to actually introduce yourself first and then talk about what's your role in food transportation or how does it affect Alaskans?
Yeah, I can just kind of start off. So yeah, I'm Kyla, and I'm the owner and operator of Arctic Harvest Deliveries based out of Anchorage, and we do we're essentially helping try to remove some barriers for local farmers to get their products to more markets. So work with local farmers, and we kind of aggregate and distribute wholesale customers, mostly restaurants, some smaller grocery stores. And then we also have a farm share program that's more of our retail arm. And so we do like a summer farm share subscription. And right now we're just doing this kind of straight retail sales through an online store. It's kind of a brief background on what we do. So as you can imagine, it's even in our name, deliveries. We're pretty much. I mean, most of our business is based on transportation. We're, there was this need for, I think, just getting products even from, the valley, the Matanuska Valley, outside of Anchorage, is just an hour away from Anchorage. But there was still that, that creates one more hurdle for farmers trying to get their products to the urban, the big market area and the big city. So just kind of creating that, filling that gap with that transportation. So we're going out to the valley, picking up products from farmers and bringing them into Anchorage. And we're providing the actual transportation to customers, so to restaurants directly. We do public pickup sites for our farm share members. We're also offering home delivery this year. Because of COVID, we added that on. So really a lot of what we do is transportation. And I think that kind of speaks to the lack of transportation that's available, that this business is kind of, came up and seen as something that could help the food industry in that way. So, we had to essentially, we actually had to build out some cold storage because we couldn't find any to rent. So it's kind of a piece of the transportation chain is having that cold storage. So we actually put up a refrigerated Connex. It was last summer or 2 summers ago. So we have kind of an aggregation site in the valley for some of our farmers. And then we put up some cold storage in Anchorage too, just because we couldn't really find any space to rent that. So yeah, transportation greatly affects what we do. Not to mention trying to, kind of expand to other areas around the state, or we ship stuff through our cargo to other locations and use couriers. But that's definitely been a big barrier, especially talking about getting to more like remote and rural areas. Just the reliability of, of temperature control for products has been a big reason for us not to kind of be more active in those areas. That's about all I have for the intro part.
Okay. So that everyone knows who's on the panels, let's continue with the introductions, because I think that would allow everyone to glean a little information from each of our panelists. So Bryce Wrigley, would you like to go next?
Yeah, my name is Bryce Wrigley from Alaska Flower Company. We've farmed in Delta since 1983. In 2011, we started Alaska Flower Company out of concern for Alaska's food security. And over the years, since I've been here, almost 40 years now, I've seen food transportation disruptions on average about every 2 or 3 years. Most of the time they're relatively short, but occasionally they have a lot of impact on the residents of the state. Some of you have been here for a long time may remember 1989, the Port of Anchorage froze over and the barge wasn't able to dock. And so for a week, the store shelves looked like the pictures that you used to see during the Soviet Union era. Some of you guys are young enough, you don't even remember those pictures, but some of us do remember those. And then another thing that happened in 2012, the Alaska Highway washed out down by Whitehorse. The grocery stores in the interior were out of many of the items, the most popular and fast moving items. They were out of them within a couple of days. In that case, the road was only closed for about 3 or 4 days, but it caused people to panic. And if you want to, understand the current issue with that, just think of what happened during the early days of COVID. Most people couldn't buy toilet paper because they panic bought. So anyway, at that time, the stores started calling us because they couldn't find flour anywhere on the West Coast. People in America had rushed to stock up on the flour and the sugar, which created a shortage and unavailability up here. And soon we found out that while we had grain, because we raise our own grain to make the cereal and the couscous and the flour, we struggled for a couple of months to find sugar to make our pancakes and cookie and brownie mixes. And we didn't expect that. It surprised us. We knew that toilet paper was short supply, didn't expect sugar would be non-existent. But in any event, it shows, again, the importance of having a more resilient system in Alaska. Anyway, these disruptions, whether they're large or small, underscore the importance of creating a resilient food system. Even the small ones remind us that the potential for disaster is there. In 2018, the earthquake that damaged Anchorage happened at 8:30 a.m. By 10 o'clock, we had 4 pallets of food on the way to Anchorage. Now, 4 pallets are certainly not enough to keep a city from starving, and that never was an issue, but it shows what is possible when we have a more resilient food system. One day, maybe we'll be able to send 400 pallets in the case of an emergency. So that probably is enough for my introduction, but certainly the COVID has highlighted for us at our business how much transportation disruptions can affect our business. Even though we have the basics, we raise our own grain, we have it, but when we have to rely on imported sugar or spices to fill out some of our products, then that continues to be something we have to make steps now to anticipate those kind of things and to store more of that at one time. Thank you.
Oh, excellent, Bryce. Really, really enjoyed hearing the view from up north. And so you're on the panel, so we'll have questions after we get through the rest of the speakers. So next on the agenda of panelists will be Walt Pickett. Walt, are you available now?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everybody, and it's a pleasure to join. So I'm the general manager of Alaska Commercial Company, or AC, as everybody in the communities that we serve knows us. I've been with the company for 24 years. And I started in Cordova, Alaska. So I know the importance of the Alaska Marine Highway System. We have a number of communities that are served by that system as well. Company's been around for 154 years. We were the original fur trading company of Alaska. If you go back, our roots go back to the the Russian American Fur Trading Company. We currently have 30 markets. We serve 30 markets directly throughout the state, all rural communities. We also serve over 100 other smaller communities through our wholesale division, plus Pacific Alaska Wholesale. We have our own warehouses in Tacoma, Washington, and Anchorage. And we also have a production facility here in Anchorage, a meat plant to serve our customers and our wholesale customers. We are the #1 bypass user in the state. So when we start talking about bypass system and the movement of product through that, we are the #1 user of that system. We spend over $22 million per year in freight costs. So it's a big component of our business. With regard to food shrink, we lose approximately $2.5 million worth of food per year due to some of the challenges associated with moving freight throughout rural Alaska. We work closely with various groups, both locally and nationally, groups like the Alaska WIC folks, the United States Department of Agriculture, et cetera. And on a personal note, similar to Chelsea, I'm a very avid gardener, love to garden, and I have my own apiary, so enjoy getting out there and working with the bees a little bit. So that's who I am. Thanks, Brian.
Oh, very, very, very nice intro. Wow. A beekeeper. Yes. Say it for the bees. Okay. So you alluded to Alaska WIC. So we're fortunate to have on our expert panel, Sandra. So take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Sandy Harbinuk, and I've been with the Alaska WIC program for 10 years, and I manage our operations are through providing benefits through retailers. WIC participants are women, infants, and children who have a nutritional risk and meet income guidelines to be able to get nutrition assistance to address any health issues. So they actually get a food benefit. They don't get a cash benefit. So they get a card that they can use in a grocery store to purchase foods that have been assigned as available to them to help address whatever nutritional deficiencies they have. So we have about 165 stores that are authorized for WIC. These stores are, there's about 45 that are large super centers or big chain stores, about 90 that are rural stores that are off the road system, and the others fall in between the IGAs and more medium-sized stores like those. So all of these stores are required to have WIC foods in stock at all times if they become a WIC vendor. And if they don't have the food, people can't get their benefits. So, you know, if it's particularly a problem for infants, if a store is out of infant formula and a child's on infant formula, there isn't any substitute that they can have. So we try to keep on top of the issues with food getting out to stores, which in the northern and western regions, bypass mail plays a huge role in that, as does weather. Other kinds of things that stores face are, you know, every so often there's a fuel issue, and there are surcharges on barged goods, which causes prices to go up and can affect ordering for small stores. So there's a variety of issues that happen. Our stores, if they don't have the minimum required amounts of WIC foods at any time, get penalized for that, and they can lose their WIC authorization. So it's a big deal for us. We've been following the bypass issues for a long time, and we know that the weather is always just such a confounding issue across the state. We also have we have the only mail out food program for WIC in the nation, the full service mail out operation. And with the help of a very good partner, Alaskan Enterprises, in December, we launched the first ever online WIC store. Participants are now able to go online and order their food rather than just getting a box that we pick out and send to them. So they can either order from the website or by phone, and their food items are mailed by priority mail to them. So they go through those foods go through the regular mail system. And that program right now is serving about 1,500 or 1,600 individual Alaskans. So it's just been transportation of food is something I wake up thinking about in the morning. So it's an issue near and dear to my heart.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that insight, Sandra. Okay, then now quickly we're gonna open up to the panel. We have essentially three main questions that I'm going to pose, and each of you can take a crack at it if you feel you have more to provide specifically to these questions, or maybe elaborate on your initial introduction. So the first question is, what opportunities exist for local, regional, and state collaborations and shared infrastructure for strengthening our transportation systems? And I would say the caveat is with respect to food transportation. And if you want me to repeat the question, I can, or maybe Robbie, did you want to put that in the chat so others can look at it? Because I know it's a lot of words in one question. Anyone want to take a crack at that one?
Ryan, did you want to start with Kyla and then go down the list, or did you just want us to jump in?
I think since you've already given introductions, I think we'll just kind of free form. So Bryce, why don't you just jump right in there? And
all right, yeah, I've thought about this a little. When a food disruption occurs in Alaska, it seems like it's always transportation related. And the nature of that is obvious because we import so much of it. During that shortage, it seemed like sales of locally grown food always spike. Kyla probably recognizes that as well. People remember local farmers during an emergency, but local farmers need access to the regular food distribution network so that local food is always part of the supply chain. Then when a disruption happens, there's local food already in the distributor's warehouse. Alaskans are familiar with it. In the stores, they've seen it there. And the increased market allows the farmer to gear up with more production and processing capacity. As far as the infrastructure, the needed infrastructure is already in place. Farmers, most of them could raise more if they could sell more. But transportation, distribution, and retailers need to make accommodations to include local food in the infrastructure. It costs more to produce local food than it does outside. Our yields are smaller. Generally, fertilizer, fuel, and labor expenses are higher. All of the segments of the food chain have the ability to charge for those higher costs, except the farmer. And he has to compete with the lower costs of this imported food. So he has to add those higher transportation, distribution costs to his production costs. But then in order to compete with that target price, that imported price, the only thing that he can reduce is his profit, which is pretty pathetic to begin with. So he has to absorb a 30 to 40% markup to a distributor and an additional 30 to 40% markup by the retailer. And then he also gets a quote from the freight company for the most expensive shipping rate because he can't fill the trailer. It's called LTL, low, less than trailer, or less than load. And several years ago, for example, we tried to get access to the remote rural villages. Felt like our product was something that would help those areas and shelf stable. At that time, again, this is several years ago, at that time, we were told that all their shipments came from Washington to an Anchorage warehouse where they're broken down and then redistributed for each village. And so we offered to take our products to the Anchorage facility for inclusion or distribution at that time, but they told us that we would need to ship it to Seattle and then they would ship it back up. Well, that didn't work for us economically. We'd love to increase our access to the villages, but it doesn't work for any Alaskan market if you first have to ship to Seattle, unless there was some mechanism to do it free on a backhaul, and then maybe the rates would be such that they could come back up. But so that's what we ran into. As I said, the infrastructure is there, but somehow we need to get all these moving parts of this puzzle to begin working together on a coordinated food security system, food delivery system approach. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Oh, very good, Bryce. This sort of kind of leads to a follow-up question is then who in the state is responsible for logistics? I understand from Alaska, a commercial company are responsible for their goods and services, and all the big stores have their ways of shipping it up. But I'm thinking within the government, should there be, is there somebody who has a role in helping with logistics? I just throw that out there.
Yeah, if you're asking me, I don't know. And I'm not sure that government should be. I think, and we'll get to this question probably later on, I think the government has a role in helping to coordinate this effort because there's a number of things government can do to help facilitate that process, to offset some of those costs, different things like that. But I think that logistically, it's really a demand market availability and demand thing where a private enterprise, a store, sees what his customers are needing, and then he organizes that, logistically that delivery, and we've gone to a just-in-time delivery system. So there's not, most stores don't have anything in the back room we're speaking about for a disruption. The efficiency of delivery system generally is such that they can order and they get it here right in time, and that way they don't have to store a whole bunch. So from my perspective, I don't think that I'm not aware of a state agency that is in charge of logistically providing for food for the residents.
Okay. So then, Walt, let's turn to you on the same question of the opportunities for collaborations and shared infrastructure. Do you have anything to add to what Bryce has provided?
Thanks, Brian. So yeah, a few things to add. Some of these have already been brought up. Pretty much anything and everything we can do to help lower transportation costs. We talked about high cost of living, and especially out in the rural areas. There was brought up before working together on a local, state, and national level to look at adding holding areas both in Anchorage and at the major hubs to hold especially highly perishable foods, because in the summer you've got frozen foods that are thawing out. Right now we've got produce and liquid items like milk, even eggs, believe it or not, that are freezing in markets as they're being transported out to these areas. And the air carriers have some holding capacity, but it's not enough. So just looking at working together to provide either funding or communal refrigeration and or heated space in these communities. Obviously, we've talked about working collaboratively to help fund the ferry system because it is such an important part in the southeast part of the state. Looking at potentially expanding distribution channels, and as we get into a little bit further into this conversation, we can talk about the proposed rail line here in the next decade coming up from northern Alberta and what that will mean to helping to transport goods into and out of state. One of the opportunities that we have that I don't believe too many people realize is we actually do use the ice road system. It's not really a system. We use ice roads here in Alaska. We actually move goods to Nuwitsit, to our store in Nuwitsit in the wintertime on ice roads. People in Bethel, they cut the ice road on the on the Kuskokwim, and people move between communities. It's much more affordable. It's once, of course, the ice is strong enough to support people and their vehicles, it's an effective and low-cost method to move goods. I'd also like to see work towards rewarding entrepreneurs in state who are either producing food or are using local people to add value to food before distribution. And then anything and everything we can do to help build partnerships, to help more vertical integration, so that we're working hand in hand on distribution of foods throughout the state. That's what I have, Brent.
Okay, well then let's turn to Kyla on a local regional basis. Do you have something additional you'd like to add from your perspective?
Yeah, a lot of things come up for me, especially I feel like our business is kind of, a smaller version of kind of the big local state transportation system. We're just, even just trying to get products from the valley to Anchorage, but also looking at expanding around the state. We've had some really cool successes with partnerships with other people. I think that's really made us able to do what we're able to do. So for example, we were sharing, we have a our cold storage in the valleys of the UEF experiment farm. So we were able to kind of partner with them and come to an agreement where we can, use their property, and we were able to put up this cold storage where it could have been really cost prohibitive for us to, find a building out there and put up a whole walk-in cooler, where this is a Connex that's with CoolBots. If you guys are familiar with those, so really, really low cost technology, also very small scale at this point, but I think it's a good start and kind of could, provide some kind of ideas for future, future programs and stuff too, and other businesses. Same thing kind of in Anchorage. We share a warehouse with Seeds of Change, which is their local, they do indoor hydroponic lettuce and herbs, and also are run by a mental health organization. So they do some like youth training and things like that. So that's been a really cool partnership. We've been sharing a warehouse with them for several years now, and it's just it's really awesome. Not only does it help us kind of moderate our costs of warehousing, but just it's a really great connection to kind of be really, in sync with what they're doing, and be kind of create this more of this community feel to what we're doing. And we're distributing their products as well, so it's just kind of cool to be actually in the growing space with them. And they just drop stuff off. They just put stuff in our walk-in for us that we order, so it's kind of pretty easy to get that product at least. So I think things like that have really been helped at least Arctic Harvest keep our overhead really low. But I think just looking at like a bigger picture, just those collaborations could be really really beneficial. I know there's like 1,000 foot, probably close to 1,000 foot square foot walk-in cooler right now sitting empty in the valley, not being used. So it's like there's one piece of infrastructure. It's like it's just waiting waiting to be used. Too, in the AC stores. Walt, I haven't talked with you personally, but we were working with Will over there, and it's been really great working with you guys this year. We were able to partner with AC stores and get get some local produce to them through their Anchorage distribution warehouse, which seems to be going really well. We're also able to partner with them on a pilot project that we're trying to get our actual retail boxes to some of the rural villages. So we started with Nome, and we're able to actually, folks will order their retail boxes from us, and then we will drop them off to the AC stores. And because they have that whole shipping logistics really dialed in, they have great pathways for that. They're able to actually ship that box, and the pickup for the customer is at the AC store. So so just partnership like that, I think that's just something that's really cool for us, and it's I think could go a long way instead of having just for us to try to create this whole new system. They already have it dialed in, so why not try to work together with folks like that that are already doing those things and really experts in those areas. One big opportunity that I see too is regional food hubs working together. So we've we work with folks in Kodiak at the Kodiak Harvest Food Co-op. There's a gal in Fairbanks at Roaming Root Market who's doing similar stuff. Folks in Homer doing the food hub. I think there's a lot of opportunities there to kind of folks to be able to aggregate products in their area, and then if we just need that way to link up those transportation systems more to get that product. But I think that could be a really strong way to kind of work together more.
Okay, thank you very much, Kyla, for that. Very, very interesting. So I can see that we really tackled that question quite well. So then I like to switch. Maybe I'll drop to the third question and have Sandy begin. And the question is, who, and this means, or maybe it's what, who or what, companies, regions, and communities should we look to for inspiration? And you can take that any which way. Sandra.
Oh, that's probably not a great question from where I sit, because what I do, I don't have a whole lot to recommend for, I think for the future. The one thing that I think that would help now and in the future would be to get the bypass mail system working as efficiently as it can be working. And I think that would require some sort of political action, whether it's a commission or task force, or maybe strategizing between the rural businesses that depend on bypass mail and some DOT people, FAA people, whoever might be involved, because that's the number one problem that I think our rural stores face is getting the food. And that's probably the biggest thing I have to recommend today.
Okay, so maybe I should have changed the wording. Maybe inspiration isn't quite right in your world, but I think you've provided some guidance and thought process on where the bottlenecks are in the system. So the other three speakers, I won't call you by name. I'll have you jump in at this point if you have something to add for this particular question regarding. I think I'm inspired by all of you of what you do, but what do you do in terms of trying to develop? What should we do to model ourselves under a better food transportation systems? Sandra mentioned bypass mail, which is an issue. And then we know that the Alaskan highway system has an issue, but are there other things that we're missing that we should strive for to make things better for Alaskans?
This is Bryce. a lot, especially interstate, most of the freight that moves around, food that moves around, moves through freight companies. And many of the well-known ones are actually based in Seattle. So even though it's an Alaska company or shipping in Alaska, it's actually based in Seattle. When we talk about food security and developing a local food system and having all these components working together, the fact that that their management is in another state entirely kind of removes the urgency for them to consider the value of establishing a local food system in Alaska. However, having said that, the local managers, the ones in Alaska, usually have regular discussions with the main office. And those discussions could include a request for maybe a special rate for transporting local food. It would be helpful for them to have some talking points if they were going to present such a proposal. I don't know if that's something that the Food Policy Council could put together, I mean, looking at it from this perspective, this is why it's important for Alaska, and this is why it's important for your company to participate in that. I think that the state, we talked earlier about roles that the state could have. The state could also implement a coordinated campaign to build awareness and promote more widespread use of local food by offering some incentives to food chain partners that are willing to take steps to increase the competitiveness of local food. So if we, for example, need to ship product from Fairbanks down to Anchorage, for example, well, a lot of stuff comes from Anchorage up, but the trucks go back down mostly empty, but they have to go back anyway. And so why not a reduced rate on getting that stuff down there, and then give them some incentive for doing that, provide them some incentive for participating in that, in lowering that or increasing that competitiveness of local food.
Anyone else would like to take a follow up with what Sandra and Bryce have presented regarding this question?
Hey, Brad, this is Walt.
Go ahead, Walt.
Yeah, I looked at this one and I was looking for specific examples. And I've got kind of three categories here as far as inspiration. The first one is, believe it or not, the United States Postal Service. We've dealt with them for years regarding bypass. And I'm pleased in the last 12 months, 18 months that we are making progress with the bypass portion of the United States Postal Service. They are putting more focus into bypass. They are putting a higher commitment, more resources. Obviously, we still have challenges, but it's good to see that they're actually working with both the transportation side of bypass and the users as well. So first of all, kudos to USPS on that one. Long ways to go, but we are making progress. Looking for a specific carrier, I would say Linden is a good illustration of a group that is really doing everything they can to try to make improvements to our distribution network. They've come up with all kinds of out of the box thinking, hovercrafts out on the rivers in the summer to deliver goods, tundra buggies up north during the winter, things that won't impact the environment, won't impact the tundra as they carry heavy containers across. And then one final example, and that's over the road system. And we don't have a lot of opportunities there, at least with a lot AC. But in bypass, you have the A stops and the B stops. A stops are primarily the hubs that go directly, Anchorage to those communities. And then the B stops are the smaller communities. And those smaller communities are the ones that really have issues because product takes a while to get out there. It might be weather, lack of lift. But in St. Mary's, Linden basically came to the United States Postal Service and said, hey, let's give us the opportunity to move it over the road. And those of you that have been out to St. Mary's Mountain Village know that there's a road that connects the two. And so Linden actually is transporting our bypass from the A stop in St. Mary's directly to Mountain Village. So the weather doesn't impact the time of delivery, which has been great. Really has resulted in quality of good improvement in our community there in Mountain Village. When I look at really inspiration from just local producers and growers, Alaska Flower, absolutely. Myers Farm there in Bethel, and there's been a number of hydroponic startups, the entrepreneurs. KIC, the local Native corporation in Kotzebue, their commitment to the community to start a hydroponic garden and sell that product at equal to or lower than prices, bringing product up from the lower 48. That has since failed, but they were willing to put it out there and try that. So those are kind of the inspirations I've seen from my desk, and kudos to every one of those because they really are helping to make a difference.
Oh, thank you for that rich content. Wow, that's quite impressive. And then Kyla, another inspirational organization. I think, did we? Yeah, I don't think you've answered this question yet. I'm getting kind of caught up in my notes. Did you have anything to add to this question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I just kind of actually added this to the chat. But Food Systems Leadership Network, which is a national organization, that's just kind of as a side note, could be a good place to get resources, for ideas of how we could, work together or do, partnerships with, different businesses or, government partners or however, what other options are out there. Just could be good to look outside the state to see some other ideas. But I think too, just, within the state, I mean, I think it's pretty inspiring that a lot of businesses have been kind of essentially creating their own transportation systems. I mean, are starting to, like I know Blood, Sweat, and Food out of Homer has started, running routes, driving trucks up to Anchorage at least, I think it was every week in the summer, once a month in the winter. Interior Meats was starting to run a truck down from Delta Junction or from North Pole, sorry. With meat, every week or so. So people are, kind of starting to take it upon themselves, I think, to create their own transportation systems when the current systems aren't working. So that's both kind of inspiration and also like telling of, the kind of the need for that to be maybe more consolidated or somehow work together more on that. So.
Great. Thank you for playing cleanup hitter on that question. So now we'll turn our attention with the few minutes that are remaining on just the expert panel conversation. And anyone can jump in on this one since it's been a great webinar so far. So what's your vision? The question is a 10-year vision, but I think that's way out there, knowing that we've had interruptions, as Bryce has mentioned, COVID and earthquakes, and of course other forces of nature that we have challenges with. So what do you think our food transportation should be? You've already touched on resiliency, that we need to be more resilient in it. So anyone want to take a crack at, again, so that would be, we're talking about by 2030, that's way out there. So what about the next few years? What's your vision for the Alaska's food transportation system and actions that we can take? And I open up to anyone on the panel, and you all have a chance to talk before we close out this session.
Well, this is Bryce again. I'll jump in and get it over with. Because this discussion really centers around transportation, I think in the whole food system, there's everybody's working in silos, and I think we would benefit from, as I've mentioned, a coordinated approach, planning, something to kind of pull everything together. But because this particular discussion just centers around transportation, I'll limit my suggestion for collaboration to the transportation segment. And I kind of build on what I mentioned earlier, that maybe the transportation segment could look at backhaul rates for local food production that was a small fraction of normal freight costs. The truck has to go back anyway, mostly empty. And the small amount of local food that they return with is really not going to affect the cost of returning that truck. The freight companies would be helping to develop a local food system that one day might feed their own families during a major food shortage. So even though some of those companies are based in Seattle, that's the argument I think that the local management of those companies could and should make, is that that company is concerned about their employees. Their employees live in Alaska. This is something that benefits their employees, strengthens the local economy, and it gives them a warm fuzzy for local in community involvement and community betterment. So anyway, if they could do that, and then let them charge off the lost revenue, from that lower rate. Let them charge that off as a charitable contribution or as advertising for their taxes. And having brought up that horrible word about taxes, as the state of Alaska moves toward what probably is going to be some form of income tax, the legislature should put in a provision that allows a tax credit or incentive for those companies that are directly involved in the development of a local food system. A local food system, in my mind, has always been a strategic asset. It isn't the same as making items for sale to tourists or even exploring for oil. Food keeps people alive. The availability of food keeps the population calm. If people know that they're going to be able to feed their families, their communities are not as likely to experience civil disobedience during an emergency. So I think that it's really important that we somehow get this coordinated effort to increase to make local food more competitive in costs, and so that and all segments have a role to do that. The farmer and his production, the transportation segment, the marketing, and even the retailer. Maybe for local food, maybe shouldn't be a 40% markup. Maybe it should be a 20% markup instead, just to kind of help make that a little more. I don't know. Some of you guys have been here a long time. You remember bringing or getting eggs up from Seattle or Washington, and you'd crack them in the pan and they'd spread all over the pan. There wasn't anything left there. They were so old that they didn't stand up at all. Or getting milk and having it spoiled already because you were already past the expiration date. That doesn't happen so much anymore because we've improved our transportation efficiency. But this ability to compete with imported food, I think, is critical to the establishment of a strong and effective local food system. Thanks.
Thank you, Bryce. Someone else want to take a bite of the apple here? Your vision?
Brian, this is Walt again. I fully agree with Bryce there. I think anything we can do in a concerted effort to lower transportation costs and increase reliability. And there are a number of things we can do along those efforts, but I think that's where the focus needs to be. I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Ladies, final words on your vision?
I can jump in. Yeah, so I kind of going back to the idea of regional food hubs working together. I think this could be a really kind of key piece. I would love to see these food hubs kind of become more robust and all have their own cold storage facilities where they're able to kind of aggregate from their communities and in a kind of a shared space, or farmers can use then help distribute from those locations around the state. And I think that I would really love to see kind of like a food hub working group, or some sort of offshoot of this kind of conversation where kind of us kind of aggregators can work together and kind of talk about some solutions we might be able to come up with together, kind kind of create this network around the state. I think it would be kind of cool as well if there was some sort of, you know, Bryce was talking about this transportation piece of tying it all, you know, figuring out how to get stuff all around the state. If there was some sort of database or some sort of clearinghouse where, you know, we know a lot of the big players, maybe there's some smaller folks, you know, like Blood, Sweat and Food or other folks that are doing these kind of, you know, certain legs of these runs. There's a way to kind of share that information more, and be able to share those, you know, share those loads coming up and going back down. I think would be, you know, kind of a small step in the right direction. And I think too, just, you know, touching on the better temperature control infrastructure and accountability, especially at airports, thinking about cargo shipping, you know, that being one of our big barriers for wanting to try to ship, you know, air freight stuff up to some of the more remote areas, is that just, you know, kind of worried about the quality of product and stuff, you know, us having to, especially being a smaller business, you know, we are not able to take on a lot of that kind of, you know, more of the hassle and stuff that goes along with trying to deal with, you know, issues with products getting damaged. So if there was some way that, you know, government was helping to support kind of that growth infrastructure in the airports, I think would be really, really great as well.
Great. And then Sandra, you'll have the last word on this panel for this third question. I know you're doing challenging circumstances for the clientele, but what's your vision in terms of making the Alaska population more resilient and getting the assistance they need in a better way? Go ahead.
Well, I agree that hubs and cold chain handling, anything that helps move the food, makes the food more reliable. I know I have stores, we require them to carry some fresh produce, and many of them are reluctant to even order any during the winter because they can't sell frozen heads of lettuce. But there's also the post office issue with post office closures, which I think should be addressed because people are ordering a lot of food directly themselves. You know, when I get on a plane, and I think, you know, I live in an urban community. I live in Juneau, and yesterday or Sunday went to the grocery store and there was no fresh milk and hardly any produce. So we experience that as well, even in the cities, but my mind is generally on the rural areas because the challenges are greater out there. But I know when I'm traveling, I'm usually surrounded by boxes of things that people have ordered from places. There's a lot of ordering from Anchorage and Fairbanks within the state and from outside the state. And when post offices are closed for 2 to 4 weeks, that really affects whether people can get food that they've paid for. So that's another area where there could be some attention, but I really like the idea of having storage facilities in rural hubs where the food doesn't spoil while it's waiting to get to its destination, and especially making cold things much more reliable for getting there. Well, thank you.
Great. Again, I'll just close out saying thank you very much to our expert panel. I wasn't sure how it was all going to go. It went way above expectations. So thanks to Bryce, Walt, Kyla, and Sandra. So I'll turn it back over to Rachel.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was a really robust conversation, and I hope people were also paying attention to the chat. Lots of great resources shared, lots of great comments and insights. And so we also are capturing the chat, and that's part of the feedback that we'll aggregate in our webinar report back to the community. So doing a time check, it's almost 1:20. This webinar, we want to be respectful of people's time, which was scheduled from 12 to 1:30. We didn't know how this was going to go, and this was great. We weren't sure if you know, it was going to be crickets, but that was not the case today, which is exciting. And so what we want to do today, with only 10 minutes left, here's the plan. Also with 40, we started, I think we peaked at 51 participants during the webinar, and we're down to 41, which is still a really substantial group. What we're going to do is share our questionnaire form here with everyone. You are welcome to stick around and chat here in one open group. We are not going to do breakout sessions. So to wrap up, I just want to remind everyone that now is the time to be kind to each other and to make sure that you're breaking bread with your neighbors safely with a mask on. We do intend to have future webinars, and we're asking for feedback in this questionnaire link that I'm about to share. If you like doing things like this, if you like having more of these webinars, we strongly encourage you to head to the website on your screen, akfoodpolicycouncil.org, and get involved with a committee. Join us as a member, donate. We are very much a grassroots organization, and we're seeking, diversity and representation from across the state and across demographics. And this is the type of education we want to continue to do more of. If your organization would like to partner, we have some resources to do so. We've already started, scheduling Zoom sessions. Our Zoom account can host a large amount of people, and we loan that out to other organizations as long as you're working on, creating an ever growing and more robust food system. So I am just so grateful to all of our panelists, to our expert presenter, Chelsea Ward-Waller, and we look forward to speaking with everyone again shortly. Here is, let me share that link with you for the questionnaire. Brian or Robbie or anyone else from the Food Policy Council, any final thoughts while I'm getting this link ready?
Let's have Robbie chime in here. She's been in the background, but we know Robbie has quite a bit of experience both with the Alaska Farmers Market Association and the Homer Food Hub, a go-to person, and we're so grateful she's with the Alaska Food Policy Council. So let's just wrap up with Robbie.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Definitely.
Think so. I think you can hear me. Awesome. Well, yeah, this webinar went really, really well. I just want to extend thank you to all of our speakers and expert panelists, but also to all the people that actively participated. The chat is just blowing up with tons of ideas. I think my only regret is that we didn't have time to do these breakout groups and work on some more tangible solutions. But given that this is our first rodeo here with webinars, we will take that into account in our next one. We are still working on topics for our next quarterly webinars. So if there is something that you're really interested in or have expertise in and would like to share with the whole Food Policy Council, please get in touch with us. We also have another workshop coming up that we are co-hosting with the Alaska Farm Bureau and the Alaska Farmers Market Association. We have folks from the Alaska DEC and the Anchorage Muni, and we're going to be doing a cottage food operations workshop on February 23rd, and that will start at 8:30. We're just getting the details together now, but I wanted y'all to just save the date. Yeah, and thank y'all all for coming. This is awesome to get folks together. I see Annette had a question. Hopefully we will have the link to the recording up in the next few days. I know Rachel and Brian are going to go through all the feedback. We also had some input sent in by a couple local farmers as well that weren't able to participate, but they wanted to provide their perspectives of what as well. So we'll be gathering that all together, and we will most likely send out just a dedicated email letting folks know the webinar recording's up, all of the information's up. So if you are not on our email list, you can go to our website under Get Involved. There's a email sign up there.
Oh, Robbie, I was just thinking, since we have the chat open, if everyone will want to just type in their email address and their location, that would be something we can gather like right now.
It's on the form. It's on the form. So
Okay.
the form I've shared twice, there's a space for your email. It's obviously not, you don't have to do it, but we'd love to know your location, and please provide your email if you want to receive a recording of this session. That will just streamline it in a form.
Thank you.
So that's it from us. Thanks, everybody. This was fun, and we're looking forward to the next one. And thank you again to our panelists and presenters.
Thank you. Good job, you guys.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.